Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and as we got ourselves yet another build for the War Within beta, we also saw a handful of classes break. Most of those breaks are not good, except for one, and that is for Protection Paladins, which for some reason has allowed them to do more damage than other DPS classes within dungeons, which I do want to take a look at, but also take a look at general Paladin changes, as the Holy Paladin over the last few weeks has actually become so much better than where it's at in Dragonflight. The spec is looking brighter than before. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I checked out Holy recently, and I think this version of Holy is going to be something that might make some players actually consider looking at Holy going forward if they're tuned correctly. But also we got some small red adjustments as well. So for today's video, let's take a dive onto the Paladin changes that have happened over the last few weeks over in the War Within beta. If you guys enjoy this regular updates like these, follow the channel. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So when taking a look at Paladins, I first want to start out with some of the hero talent changes, and then we'll talk about each and every one of the specs specifically, primarily highlighting Holy and Retribution, since Prod didn't get too many changes, though. First of all, talking about Lightsmith is going to kind of reflect on Protection Paladins as of this recent build. So Lightsmith as a playstyle is basically all about buffing your allies, granting them shields or weapons, and every time you share those buffs, you also get them as a Paladin as well. So there's a mix of defensives and offensive benefits, with offensive sword either buffing your damage, but also your healing output. So there's a bit of this like Holy Paladin value. Anyway, for the Lightsmith Paladin, which is available for Prot and Holy, your primary ability, or I guess one of the two out of the two Holy armaments, Sacred Weapon, has been amped for both Holy and Prot. Sacred Weapon damage has been buffed by 60%, while the healing of Sacred Weapon buffed by 50%. The talent of Divine Guidance has also been amplified by 100% for this damage and healing, where for each Holy Power ability cast, your next Consecration will deal additional damage or healing immediately that is split amongst all enemies or allies. With the Blessing of the Forge, which is a capstone benefit where whenever you pop wings, you summon a sacred weapon that is applied to one of your allies. Your sacred weapons also gain the benefit where casting spells on the target echoes the effects of your Holy Power abilities. So as you use damaging abilities or healing abilities, those weapons will now echo that effect, and that echo benefit has been adjusted a little bit so it's a bit more even across the healing and the damage counterparts. Finally, with the talent of Hammer and Anvil, they also saw a bit of a decent damage and healing increase from this one, buffed up by 50% as well. So quite sizable changes for the Lightsmith playstyle. However, somewhere across this, they ended up adding an extra 0 when buffing up Sacred Weapon for Protection Paladin specifically. And for some reason, your weapons now echo a huge portion of your overall damage. It's kind of this weird scaling where you give this weapon to an ally, but it utilizes your stats in order to buff that weapon. Where essentially Protection Paladins are now currently able to do a significant amount of group-wide damage contribution within dungeons, to the point where you're literally doing top damage above all of the other DPS classes, which is straight up unheard of. But yeah, as of right now, Protection Paladin for a little bit of time became one of the strongest, not the strongest, when it comes to at least damage output as a tank class for dungeons in particular, and even works in raids too. It all depends kind of who receives the weapon, so there may be some kind of gaming to it. So if the right person gets access to the sacred weapons, a certain class maybe potentially, and if maybe their attacks have some kind of scaling with a sacred weapon on top of it, this essentially creates this bugged interaction where you're probably doing the most amount of damage out of everybody in the party just for giving out weapons to get everybody armed. Besides this, we also got a hero talent adjustment for Templar as well. For the most part, Templar has gotten adjusted with their defensive of Saint Crusade. Eye of Tear or Wake of Ashes Retribution will now provide you a shield for a portion of your maximum health. Then, after you get the ability Hammer of Light, your main primary ability, this ability will now heal you for 50% of your maximum health, increased by 2% per additional target hit. However, any overhealing the weapon does, let's say you're using it while you're fully healthy, will instead create a barrier around the character instead. So Templar ability not only deals a ton of damage with its Hammer of Light ability, which is pretty good for Prot as well as Retribution, but now that damage is going to be created into a shield, and then that damage is also going to be converted into healing, and anytime you overheal, that also becomes a shield. So there's a bit more of a defensive value for Protection Paladins when it comes to aggressively using this ability to benefit from its effect. But for Retribution, that's honestly just a slight survivability buff, which is a good bit of defensive options coming out of Templar. Now, a huge portion of this update, however, is going to be covering the spec of Holy, which has really seen a ton of changes over the last bit. And if you've been playing Holy Paladin Over on Live Realms, I really do think you should take a second look at this spec specifically when it comes to its beta counterpart, because while it feels similar, it doesn't quite feel the same. And I say that in the best way possible. The thing about Holy Paladins is, for a longest time, they've been a spot healer. They're all about using big bursty healers to top somebody out of danger. They're not a Rested Druid who could spread healing over time to everybody else, or a Disc Priest who sets up a big raid-wide, big burst windows. They really are all about micromanaging allies and trying to get them out of the brink of danger, while also putting themselves in danger, and with a bunch of support abilities on top of it. And I feel like for a good bit, or at least throughout Dragonflight, they've been kind of bogged down by having to juggle so many cooldowns and so many little trickle heal abilities here and there just to be effective. And it was a lot of planning just to feel like all your healing abilities are actually doing their job. But the changes they've gone through War Within make him so much more punchier, and that basic rotation of Holy Paladin and the basic ability gameplay is so much more satisfying. So over the last few builds, they've adjusted their abilities in a drastic way. For example, all of the holy power spenders such as Word of Glory, Light of Dawn, or if you play Herald of the Sun, my personal favorite, we got Eternal Flame. All of these holy power spending abilities have been buffed by 13%, with a slight mana increase, but it's not the worst because it just gives your holy power spenders more punchiness, and they feel a lot better to press in general. Holy Shock as an ability has also been buffed by 40%. This does come with a bit of caveat, but that healing is a lot better. Mana cost also slightly reduced, so you can spam out Holy Shocks a little bit more. Their talents, as you can see, if you take a look at some of these points, they look a little different than before, but essentially Holy Shock is now a much more reliable of a heal. Even the Flash of Light mana cost ability, that has been cut down by 50%, so it becomes even more energy efficient healing. But also their primary heal that I feel like I haven't used in a very, very long while, which is Holy Light, has gotten quite a substantial buff to its overall healing. It is still very mana hungry, so you're not going to be able to use this ability all that often. But if you wanted to play like a Cassidy Holy Light build, there might be light at the end of the tunnel for this type of Holy Paladin playstyle, which gives you so much burst and incredible amounts of recovery when planned correctly. This could be a ton of healing to really break an ally from like 2% to 100% in a single global if you do it correctly. So some of the other changes that have happened also this week specifically is Glimmer of Light is gone. You no longer have this little trickle healing as a Holy Paladin. Glimmer of Light is out of the picture. It's been around, and I think it was introduced back in BFA, survived all the Shadowlands, and made its way to Dragonflight, and now as a War Within, it is gone. Instead of Glimmer of Light and Holy Shocks giving you like a little heal over time that kind of lasts for a little bit afterwards, now you just have a big Holy Shock. That's all you get. One single Holy Shock that does a ton of healing, all from the same go. And then you have a slightly more empowered basic abilities for your holy power builders and spenders, and that's essentially what's replacing the entire Glimmer playstyle. And also several talents have seen a slightly different position as well, but we'll go through some of the more important stuff as we get through some of the newer additions. One of the newer talents that have been added pretty early into the rows is Extrication. Word of Glory and Light of Dawn gain up to 30% additional chance to critically strike, based on your target's current health. Lower health targets are more likely to be critically struck. So this is kind of awesome because it gives your emergency heals when somebody is actually super low, more likely chance to critically strike, which gives you like an inflated amount of crit. But this is overall a good change that, again, you're trying to get more value out of trying to get your allies out of danger. Liberation is another talent that can be found over here that plays with another stat. Word of Glory and Light of Dawn have a chance equal to your haste to reduce the cost of your next Holy Light, Crusader Strike, or Judgment by 4,000, which gives you a little bit more mana management on abilities such as Holy Light, which is still going to be very mana hungry, as well as Judgment, Crusader Strike, but at least this allows you to play with your resources as well as with a stat of haste specifically. Truth Prevails is a very interesting talent that can be found kind of next to Beacon of Faith and your Beacon of Virtue, where Judgment now heals you for 127,000 healing and its cost is reduced by 30%, so much better on mana. 50% of overhealing from this ability will now be transferred to 2 allies within 40 yards. So this gives you more of this like melee self-healing playstyle, or rather a self-preservation playstyle where you are going to be using judgments in order to generate holy power. It is going to be a little bit cheaper to cast, so you don't have to worry about your mana being spent too heavily, and which is a pretty good trade for spending or generating holy power. But also that self-healing or that overhealing going to allies just makes it a little bit more efficient, which I don't hate. It doesn't do a lot of healing, but I think it does set up for some kind of a melee healing build potential. Glistening Radiance is another talent that has been adjusted. It's actually an upgrade talent from Saved by Light, where if an ally with the beacon drops low health, they'll actually gain an Absorb Shield that procs it once a minute. So with Glistening Radiance, spending Holy Power has a 25% chance to trigger Saved by the Light's Absorb effect at 30% effectiveness without activating its cooldown. So this is just anytime you spend holy power for damage, for healing, whatever. Anybody with your the beacon on them, either it is the beacon of virtue on AoE or beacon of faith and beacon of light on 2 targets perma, they just gets the absorb effect for 30%, which is kind of good. It actually procs a decent bit. Last Protection is another talent that functions with your beacon playstyle. Allies with Beacon of Light receive 5% less damage, so it's just a little bit of defensives that can be good in Mythic Plus or certain key situations where, let's say, a squishy class is taking damage, like previously Hunters were that class that a Paladin would normally beacon. That would have been a pretty big benefit for the current or previous rate tier of Dragonflight, in fact. Overflowing Light is another talent that functions off of Holy Shock, where 50% of Holy Shock's overhealing is now transferred as an Absorb Shield, since the ability is going to be more crit heavy, so there's a good chance it could overheal an ally. So you can create a shield that cannot exceed 10% of your current maximum health. So this does scale off of your health, so the more stamina you have and the better gear you have, the better the shield can be on your allies. Rising Sunlight is another talent that has been completely redesigned. You will notice that Daybreak as a talent is completely removed. However, they wanted to maintain a Daybreak synergy either way. So Rising Sunlight is its replacement that essentially cuts down on the amount of cooldowns that Paladins have to press. After casting Avenging Crusader, your next Holy Shock casts 2 additional times. This is a little different for your Avenging Wrath Might, where if you do press the Might, that's 2 Holy Shocks will be cast 2 additional times. And after casting Divine Toll, your next 2 Holy Shocks will cast 2 additional times. So normally you pair this ability with your Divine Toll, where after Divine Toll, your next few Holy Shocks would do a little bit more healing overall. So now if you just press Divine Toll and you press Holy Shock, you just get a lot of resources immediately, very, very quickly, which I really like the cut down on globals that you get out of this playstyle. The Talent of Glorious Dawn has also been redesigned a little bit. Right now it reads that Holy Shock has a 12% chance to refund a charge when cast, and its healing is simply increased by 10%, which again makes Holy Shock playstyle and heavily leading into Holy Shock with things such as Light of the Martyr and even Bestow Light, a much more of a viable playstyle to really amp Holy Shock back to kind of where it was originally meant to be. So from my understanding over in the War Within beta, the development of Holy Paladin has focused on adjusting them in terms of how Paladins interact with their abilities. Things like adjusting how trickle healing works with certain, smaller healing over time effects that are kind of like a drop off of a bigger heal. But also I noticed they reduced the number of some of their cooldowns. And the result when it comes to playing the Paladin is quite noticeable. First of all, they redirected a lot of the trickle healing into your rotational buttons, suppressing things such as Holy Shocks, your Holy Power spenders, hell, even Light of Dawn to some degree, and you playing around your infusion of light procs right now feels more impactful and even more important as a healer's primary focus. Also helps reduce reliance on cooldowns because your abilities are a lot more impactful, and that increases the satisfaction of playing the Holy Paladin by quite a bit. Also, cooldowns you already have are right now stronger since your basic kit is a little bit stronger than before, but you also have a little bit less cooldowns to work with, like no longer having to apply Daybreak together with your Divine Toll, and your Wings by itself with your main kit being a little bit stronger. Wings now feels like a much better button to use now. So it just feels a lot better where you no longer feel like you have to juggle a bunch of cooldowns and double stack them together in order to be effective. This means a lot less prep work when it comes to Holy Paladin of micromanaging every one of your cooldowns and a very specific rotational playstyle. You pop cooldowns, you use your abilities effectively, and you see better healing output. Overall, I'd say Holy Paladin compared to Dragonflight has actually become a very fun healer. It's hard to tell if it's going to be like meta or best in slot healer for all endgame content, but it's ridiculously fun. And I've been able to experiment with a bunch of builds, and I feel pretty strong whether I'm trying to go for like a Cassidin build, a Holy Shock build, a melee healer build. There's a few less builds, I'd say, that you can really pick from, as they're really trying to narrow down your focus. But from the amount of abilities that you can combine together, it feels really, really good to play. It still requires a little bit of careful planning when it comes to dealing with some of the high stress and high damage encounters and, let's say, dungeon situations and certain boss fights. So you do need to do a little bit of planning, but for the most part, as long as you are actively maximizing the value of all of your basic rotation abilities, everybody should be alive for the most part. And as long as you press defensives or immunities at certain times, as long as you're able to focus on your basic rotational capabilities, everybody lives. And that is the best part, where I think right now in Dragonflight, even if you are playing the class correctly, if you just don't have enough cooldowns, people are going to start falling off and bleeding out and dying off, and there's just not much you can do if you mismanage any one of ECDs, and there's just too many things to juggle as a paladin on live, and too many things you got to stack together to feel effective. Where on beta, you press wings, you're effective. Here you go, here's a window, just play around your rotational buttons effectively, and everybody should live, and that is the best part. Overall, I think this is a much better version of Holy Paladin. Again, hard to say if they're going to be like a best in slot healer for all forms of endgame content, but this version I think is an upgrade compared to the Dragonflight version, and I really want to explore this one a bit more. I think it's actually a lot of fun, and I'm really now slowly starting to gravitate towards Holy back again, because this is definitely a better version, not just with hero talents, but just with this change specifically. And now that I can stop yapping about Holy, we still got one more Paladin spec to take a look at, and that is Retribution, which only saw a couple of updates this week, such as a talent adjustment to Vanguard of Justice, where enemies hit by other Holy Power abilities take 30% increased damage from your next Divine Storm, stacking up to 5 times. We actually got to test out this ability a little bit in the recent raid testing, and your Divine Storm can actually do quite a bit of damage. Pair this together with an ability such as Empyrean Legacy, where Judgment will empower your next single target Holy Power ability to automatically cast Divine Storm with a 25% increased effectiveness, and now Divine Storm can add quite a bit of cleave element towards your Vanguard of Justice. So if you want to build your Paladin to be a little bit more single target focused, but you want to have some cleave elements as part of your playstyle, you can now combine those two talents together in order to create this like single target, but also some pseudo cleave bursty play. Another talent I saw above this week as well is Judge, Jury, and Executioner. Holy Power generating abilities have a 15% chance to cause the next final verdict to hit an additional 3 targets at 100% effectiveness. So even more value for Holy Paladins that want to find a middle ground between being able to do single target, but also cleaving enemy targets nearby. This is something that Paladins have been looking forward, because Red Pally for a good bit has been either like a full single target build or a full AoE build, and there was nothing really to do in between. So now with this new array of talents, there's a little bit more value for having like a mostly single target build with some cleave elements included, you know what I mean? Or maybe like even an AoE build that can provide a bit more single target value towards it as well. So there's like, man, it's so good. It is such a good change in general. Playing around with it on the raids, you get some limited value unless you can actually get into a full cleave fight, but it does feel good in dungeons, where if you are going to be running tyrannical and you want to have a little bit more of the boss focus, but you don't want to be a complete slouch in AoE, there's a little bit more value to be gained with being able to go heavier into the pure single target value. But with that being said, that's going to be everything I got so far for the class of Paladin, and honestly, I like what they've done with Holy, and I wonder what kind of changes they're going to give them in the future. Really hoping that Holy Paladin keeps maintaining the same go they have right now. I like being able to not have to micromanage what feels like, 7, 8, 9, 10 different cooldowns in order to have any kind of effective 5-minute group-wide healing. I love what they're doing with it so far, and I think if they can keep the same track forward over the next few weeks and of the beta builds, I think Holy Paladin might actually become one of my more favorite healers, or definitely top 3, at least compared to where it's at currently in Dragonflight. But with that being said, I want to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about all the different Paladin changes, from the hero talents, the Holy Paladin adjustments, and some of the additions that they got for Retribution Paladin? Also, what other Paladin changes would you want to see? Like, if you just could apply any change forward, if you would put any change right now to see in the next build, what else do you think Paladin needs as a class? I feel like we've covered mages a lot, warriors a lot, death knights a lot on this channel, but where do you think Paladins are right now, and what do you think they need to be successful going forward in the next expansion? I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.